So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with RokoM, Michelle, and Kristi Beaufore. She is, I'm going to write, this is a newer title, even though it's a similar role that you had, Executive of Operations at Sutter Health with the Medical Foundation on the Valley side, right?
You got it.
And Roko and I met Kristi back working with Sutter Health, an amazing leader, love hanging out with her, love chatting with her, and I've missed seeing your face. So welcome.
I know.
So this week's episode is going to be on the power of relationships, and I do want to kick us off with a quote, and there is a number of them, and I'm sure we're going to weave them in through our chat with Kristi today. It's about being genuinely interested in everyone you meet. And everyone you meet will be genuinely interested in you. And the word that stands out for me is the genuine aspect of this. So this isn't about faking it till you make it. This is about genuinely be interested in people. And it has so much to do with leadership. So Kristi, what are your thoughts?
I love that you said faking it till you make it. That's interesting. I think maybe there's a place for that, but not in relationships. And people know that when you aren't genuine, which is just such a wonderful word, people realize and feel like maybe even in some cases you're patronizing them. So I think that that genuine piece is so important. And I think we talked about before, the thing about relationships is it's not about this person is going to be somebody that you invite over for the holidays or, becomes your best friend or your maid of honor. This is just somebody that you are connecting with in a way that's humble and, like you said, genuine, and also a little bit of vulnerability, which I think people think of that as a bad thing. And it's okay to be that way. I just actually had, this is what really stuck with me, is I just had my one-on-one with Gary Zufelt, who is my CEO that I report to. And we started off our one-on-one talking about our personal lives, what we were doing on our upcoming vacation and how our families were doing. And then we got into our one-on-one and what a difference that makes.
Well, I think you feel honored and respected, because the point is I'm listening to you talk. We are people first, middle, and last, right? And a lot of times what happens, and I know it was that way, traditional leadership, is we had to separate the two. And I think something with COVID has really opened the door and said, you know what? Most of the time when people went remote, there is no physical separation anymore between work and home. And so maybe we should open the door and bring more of personal in and acknowledge what people may be going through, because it does impact what they do, their interactions, the relationships. And I think that's powerful.
Yeah. There's so much more to a person than their job or their title, and taking the time to have that conversation about your personal life. It's addressing the whole person. It's connecting with the whole person, because to your point, Michelle, you can't, turn it off. When you come to work, whether it's remote or in person, you're still that you still bring that family life with you, even though, it may not show up in the work that you do. It shows up in how you work throughout the day. So acknowledging it and talking about it helps people to be seen and to be feel valued, that they're more than just their hands or their mouth.
And I think when you have someone going through a challenging thing in life, you're in a better position to give them grace.
Yeah.
And versus if you're not aware about it. One team I know goes through and there's they go through a pie, right? And so it's the physical. How are you doing physically? What's going on with you intellectually? What's going on with you spiritually? What's going on with you emotionally? And people can do all of them if they want and stay where they're at. That's how I kick off the meeting, or pick one of them and talk about it. And so I think those kind of things are important, because then you can celebrate the successes and you can help people you can understand if people kind of check in and out or weave in and out during the day or the week, because they have something extraordinary going on.
Well, and two things that come to mind, going back to what you said about COVID. So if we can find a silver lining in COVID, when we really started embracing the virtual aspect and people started turning on cameras, we didn't have these great backgrounds that we have.
Yeah.
It was your kitchen or it was your living room. And I think that opened the door for those conversations. I know somebody said to me, "Oh, I love the paint on your wall." And that right there starts that connection.
You're like, "Oh my God, thank you."
Yes, yes.
Or do you imagine the first time
totally.
looking in? I remember looking at the camera before, at virtual backgrounds and stuff, to your point, and I'm like, "Oh my, I have to straighten up back there."
I know.
It's looking pretty bad. But you don't
what
see
you leave
it
on the counter.
Yeah, you don't see it when you're facing the monitor and you're like, "Oh my God, okay, there's a whole nother world back there."
Well, and you got to see kids and hear dogs and family members, and some, it was good, and some we had to watch what we were doing. But that it opened the door to say, "Oh my gosh, that's what your kids look like," or that's what your kitchen looks like, your office. And I think that starts that connection. People feel human. We don't just live, leaders don't just live in, somewhere that nobody knows, it's a street nobody knows about. And that makes that connection easier, I think.
Yeah. So we always ask when we have guests. So as a leader, how did you start your journey on creating better relationships with the people you work with or the people that report to you?
Well, I think it speaks to that past that Michelle was talking about. I started by creating bad ones. So I think that any leader through your journey, and that's embracing your past and hoping that people don't, especially hold you hostage to it, especially with those of us who have worked maybe as long as we have in an organization. As a leader, you go through, so many phases. And it took a lot of really bad relationships and people starting to feel comfortable with giving feedback to say, "Oof, I don't feel comfortable coming to you with this. You seem to react this way." And I realized in reflecting back on that, most of the time I felt like I needed to be right. It wasn't about connecting with that person. I needed to show that person I was right about what I was talking about, and there was no conversation to be had. And that should trump anything. I know what I'm talking about, so I shouldn't have to build a relationship with you. You should just like me for that. So it took a couple of those and some hard conversations from people I respect before I started making that transition. And I think some of the things that I do now with my team is, we have team time that has nothing to do with work. It's totally outside of work. If it's going to Topgolf, if it's axe throwing, if it's, just something fun that has nothing to do with work. And that helps create those connections. And we also have a text thread where we share a lot of what we're doing outside of work. And that's really super important. I think it doesn't have to be invasive. And I want to stress that because I think people will hear this and go, my personal life is my personal life, but it doesn't have to be invasive. It can be enough to where people feel like they know something about you.
There's awareness. Go ahead, Rocco.
I was just going to say, what stood out to me is the shift from focusing on yourself of, I needed to have the answers, internal focusing on you, shifting to focusing on the team and wanting to know more about them or do more with them, but the shift from me to them. That really stood out.
What I wondered about, Kristi, is what you described and the multiple connection points that you have with your team that's outside of the work environment, right? It's not work focused. What have you noticed about work as a result of those multiple connections outside of work?
The ability for us to challenge each other in that safe environment. So I think that, and we really show up in a way that when you come into a room with this team, it is all hands on deck. It doesn't matter, where people are in their leadership journey or their title. We challenge each other. It's respectful. It's honest. And I think that is what makes, going back to that genuine relationship building.
That's awesome. I mean, and so has that evolved? I mean, so when did you start making that shift? Was it when COVID hit, or?
I would say that it started prior to COVID. And it was just, doing little things outside of the office. I think outside of the work environment that made it easier for people to start seeing a little bit of that personal life, a little bit of how you act. And I think it lets your guard down. Sometimes we're at work, we feel like, you have to show up in a certain way. And once you start realizing that you will get a much better response from people if they see that more vulnerable side of you, that helps to transition. So we're doing this in this non-work environment, and it makes it a little easier to bring that non-work environment side of you to the work side.
Nice.
Thanks. I have one other question. Are you okay? So I'm wondering, because my brain is going to, as you're talking, it's like, to your point, it's not about, putting people on your Christmas list or inviting them over for personal birthday parties. But what I wonder, people listening, Kristi, of leaders that haven't started down this path is, how do you start? Where do you start?
I think it starts with having honest conversations with your department and your team and your colleagues. So this is even beyond your team, but your colleagues, about asking them how they feel about you, asking for feedback about you. People always think of feedback as I have to give feedback to somebody. When you give feedback to somebody who hasn't asked for it, sometimes that may feel like you're correcting my behavior, you're correcting what I did. So start going out there and asking for feedback. I genuinely want to know how I did in this environment. When I delivered this, what do you think? How do you feel? What can I do differently? What do I do well and what do I do more of? And I think the more that you have those conversations and that becomes kind of an inherent behavior, then people start to feel comfortable in how you react to what you're hearing. So that's the most important. If you are, you know what, we're done, this conversation's over, obviously that's not creating that safe environment. But if it's a thank you, I appreciate that. I didn't know that. I really appreciate that you felt comfortable. And people see you make that shift the next time you show up.
I love that. And I think that's part of the building relationship piece and that trust, right, between them. Roko, what's on your mind?
No, I love what she was saying about asking for feedback. And I know we've had conversations about asking for feedback before. So, I mean, it's such a great way of building relationships. I was thinking,
you're gonna go to Brene Brown quote.
Yes. Because
I thought
Brene Brown quote.
There's a quote by Brene Brown.
Mind.
Yes, but I'm like, okay, I want that in this conversation.
Yes. Okay. So Brene Brown wrote. She didn't call it relationships, but she called it connection, which to me is about what happens when you have a relationship. There's a connection. So it's the energy that is created between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, and when they give and receive without judgment. And that without judgment is hard because we're all bringing in our own biases. But if you're doing it from I see you and I hear you and I value your perspective, then that judgment is easy to let go of.
So it's interesting because there's different perspectives to that, right? When you said that, I went to Kristi, your comment about feedback, right? Where do you start? You start by asking for feedback. So part of that is there can be judgment on behalf of the person that's giving you feedback, right? They've judged you the fact that this is how you are, you're not going to change, it's never going to be there. There's also judgment on the receiver of the feedback, right? Is that I've asked for this stuff and this person's honest with me, and now I think you're a pile of whatever because you're trying to hurt me or whatever it may be. And so to that point, removing that judgment, it needs to be on all sides, right? Because I need to look at it. If someone comes to me and asks for that feedback in the relationship building, I have to give them grace to, you know what, you're actually trying to make a change. Because I think that's the first part of it. The other part of it is I've asked for this, they may not deliver the feedback in the way that I want to hear it, but the fact that they're courageous enough to do it, I need to gracefully accept it as well. And to your point, it's not easy. It's not.
It's not. It's not easy at all. And I think that part of giving feedback is making sure that when you start that process, it's intentional. It's not something where you just say, give me feedback, because that's too general.
Yeah.
People then freeze. Oh, you're doing a great job. And you're not getting what you want. The feedback has to be intentional about an interaction that you've had with that person. Then that person feels more invested in giving you that really robust feedback that you need, both what went well and what you could do better.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, one of the things that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Roko.
I was going to say, one of the things that Simon Sinek would always say in a couple of his videos is when leaders ask how their team is doing or their coworker is doing and they respond fine, that's an indication that it's not fine. And so specificity around your questions helps open up and helps people get to that vulnerability space where they can share really what's happening in their life.
Well, and I think relationships, when I think about all the positive benefits of the power of relationships with regard to leadership and work and everything else, is people feel supported. I mean, you've got the Great Resignation movement, you've got, turnover rates, you've got all that stuff. And that is change at the core of change for people. And it's not easy to do. I mean, people think, oh my God, they left, that's not an easy choice to make when you leave, because a lot of that it's part of your identity. I know it was part of my identity, right? When I was at Sutter Health, and that was a big change for me to step out and do something different. And so I think those relationships help with those conversations, understanding, and people to feel like they're more connected than what they may have been before. It's just powerful stuff.
Well, I think to what you said before too, when you have that connection and somebody may be going through something, and you will know, I mean, it surfaces quicker when you have that relationship. So if you see that somebody's struggling, and you have that relationship, then you can have that conversation. What do I need to do to help you? How can I help you? I see that this is what you're struggling with, and that person feels safe to come to you to say, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what I need to do. And you feel comfortable saying, this is how I can help. In the past, it would be, you're not doing your work, so I'm going to hold you accountable to that. Now it's, what do I need to do to help you feel that you can either take the time off that you need to get whatever you need, comfortable, feel good about how you come back to work, or is it something about work that I need to do differently? And that relationship just helps nurture that.
Yeah, no, I agree. So thank you. I've loved seeing your face and chatting with you again. I've missed you so much. I see you all the time, and I always love to see you. So to wrap up, Kristi, what's on your mind about what one thing, or maybe two, if you need two, that you want people to walk away with?
I think the first thing is what we've said several times today is relationship building is not about the birthday cards and the holidays. It's about having just a genuine connection where people feel like there's something beyond that work that they know about you, even if it's that you have a dog or that you have a cat or you don't like dogs and cats, whatever that is. It's just that connection. And I think the second thing I would say is the power of feedback. You're not going to begin this journey just by saying, let's be a great team and let's all build this great relationship. You have to be intentional about that. And it has to be something that it's a behavior that you model moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. Roko.
Yeah, for me, I think it was when Kristi was sharing about the relationships and shifting her focus from herself thinking, oh, I need to have all the answers, I need to show up in that way, and shifting the focus to the individuals or her team and saying, what do they need? How can I help them? What can I learn about them to build? So I that stood out to me, and I just love that.
That's cool. One of the things I appreciated is what you talked about, your one-on-one with Gary, and the fact that you didn't dive right in, or don't dive right into work, business, whatever it is, the task at hand. There is some space created to connect personally before you dove into that. And I think that's a really awesome practice, whether it's a team meeting, whether it's, you know, individual one-on-ones, when you're greeting people. It could be a group meeting that at the front end of it, you've got some level of people being able to make those connections, instead of you thinking, you know, God, they're chatting and we can't get the meeting going. Build in time for that. Because I think all that stuff is about those relationships and those connections. And that's the thing I think is a powerful reminder. And so I appreciate you commenting on that, because otherwise it could just be like, well, this is what we do. No, to your point, we need to be intentional about this is what we do. So thank you for that. So I just love this and love seeing you, and would love to do it again. This is Leadership Soundbites with RokoM, Michele, and Kristi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Please like, share, subscribe, and we will chat with you next time.
Bye.